everybody. My name's Mike. I'm here to talk about Sidekiq today, as you might expect. I'm always amazed by the number of people who don't know me or Sidekiq, because there's always new people coming into the community. So just as a quick overview, Sidekiq, of course, is the most popular background job framework in Ruby today. It's a unique sort of project because it actually has a commercial side to it. I sell Sidekiq Pro and Sidekiq Enterprise. Thank you. My largest customer is doing 250,000 jobs per second through Sidekiq. So it scales pretty well. It uses Redis for its storage, and it was one of the first major pieces of Ruby infrastructure that was multi-threaded. So your jobs are running simultaneously. Another interesting fact about Sidekiq is it's not specific to Rails. You can run it with any Ruby app. Sinatra, Hanami, whatever, Sidekiq will work with it. So today I want to talk about three things: the past, the present, and the future. So I've been doing open source almost from the day I started programming. I started programming in college, and I released the source code with the binaries that I put up on my public web page. I just loved creating software and sharing my code with other people so that they could learn from what I learned. I've been doing open source professionally since I joined the Maven team in 2003, back when I was doing Java. I switched to Ruby in 2007, and of course I've been doing Sidekiq for the last 13 years. And I love open source. I love solving my own problem. I love seeing how other people solve their problems and the creativity that they use. I love the social support that we all get when we talk in chat rooms and forums about solving the same problems. And I love the fact that our open source maintainers become sort of the respected elders of our community. But there's one problem with open source, and we know what that is. It's the support burden that it brings. And that's because everybody has only so much altruism that they can just give away before that well runs empty. And the more successful your open source project becomes, the more support you've got to give to your users. And that leads to burnout. And I knew that when I started Sidekiq, if I was going to be successful, I was going to burn out. So I needed to have a way to work for the long haul so that I could keep you successful and me successful at the same time. I decided to proceed down the financial approach. I decided if I could make Sidekiq my job, that I could go the distance and I could maintain it for decades. I initially tried to sell a commercial license. That sold, but I think it was pity sales more than anything. What really worked was when I pivoted to an open core model. That is to say, Sidekiq is open source, but Sidekiq Pro and Sidekiq Enterprise are going to be closed source, and you'll have to pay to access those features. And really, that worked. After 18 months, my revenue, my sales were actually higher than my full-time job. So at that point, I said, I need to incorporate and start my business, and I did. But I had some specific goals. I didn't want to make the same old software business that we have all seen. Take venture capital, take seed funding, hire, with all due respect, to sponsor and have a booth here and that sort of thing. I didn't want to follow that same old path. So one thing I wanted was to remain focused on the code. So I vowed not to hire. I vowed to keep my paperwork and administrative burden to a minimum. I wanted to stay focused on the code, keeping my hands dirty. And that's what I did. And thankfully, the sales worked really well. My first full year, I did 85,000, 185,000, 480,000. I wished it had kept growing at that rate. I did the calculation, and it's $5.1 trillion after 20 years. If I was making that much money, I'd be in a mega yacht off the coast here and not staying at a hotel on Lombard Street. But that brings us to the present day. What has been some of the secrets to making it so successful? Well, I've tried to, like the open source ethos, I've tried to maintain that self-service, do-it-yourself kind of attitude with everything I do. I try to make it as quick and as easy for customers to purchase my products. You can put in a credit card number and buy Sidekiq Pro in 30 seconds. Another thing that worked well was to segment my customers into small budget and large budget. And that's what Sidekiq Pro and Sidekiq Enterprise are for. Sidekiq Pro is for those with a small budget that just want to support me and have some of those basic features. And Enterprise is for those large companies that have bigger budgets, and they just want everything. They want all the features. Another thing I learned early on was to prefer subscriptions, not one-time payments. That reoccurring revenue really smooths things out and keeps you going. I also automate everything. I avoid, if at all possible, to have any customers need manual billing. That's why I do not allow any sort of invoicing below $10,000 a year, because invoicing usually leads to a lot of hand-holding. I also do not touch customer data with a 10-foot pole. You download my software and you run it in your walls, and I don't know anything else. And that saves a lot of legal and regulatory paperwork. Another thing I try to do is I try to work in the public as much as possible. Again, going back to that open source ethos. When you work in public, people can follow you. People can learn from those documents. And that lets people solve their own problems, which means less support burden on me. So my docs are in the wiki. Features come through pull requests so that people can see the conversations that have happened and the decisions that were made. If you've got questions or support problems, you open an issue in GitHub. And that paper trail is really important to minimize that support load and gives me an avenue to feedback on the product also. Now, if you do buy Sidekiq, it's going to look like this. When you buy it, you get an email. It says, put this block in your gem file, configure these credentials, and that's it, you're done. Bundle install, and you've got the functionality in your app. And that support, that purchase, keeps me going year after year after year. So the fun has never stopped. We keep putting in more and more features into it. Sidekiq 7 came out a few years ago with this beautiful metrics page. Sidekiq 7.3 added iterable jobs, which is a cleaner way of dealing with long-running jobs. Sidekiq 8 allows you to profile your jobs in production. And Sidekiq 8.1 will be coming soon. You know, it's just, train keeps on there. It never stops. The fun never stops, shall I say. And so after 13 years, I'm really proud of the results. 231 versions, almost 7,000 issues, 2,300 customers, mid-8 figures in revenue, and all with zero investment, just me. But lots of help from the open source community. So that's the present. Let's talk about the future. The only constant is change, as they say. The problem is that I don't live forever. None of us do. And so our systems and our applications that we're building today, out of all these open source dependencies, they're going to last for decades. They may last longer than we live. The maintainers burn out. Dependencies stop being supported. And so the question is, who's going to be maintaining these systems for the long haul? Well, when you talk about ceding control from one person to another, in the business world, that's called an exit. And for a project in a company like mine, we've got a couple possibilities for an exit. I could open source everything and just say, let's go back to square one. Sidekiq is all open source now, and we have all the same problems as usual. Another possibility is I just sell it to private equity, and they deal with it. These are the logos of all the companies that exist out there to buy SaaSes. I've had at least a dozen offers of acquisition from these people. A third possibility is to give it away to a nonprofit or a foundation whose mission is to support our community. And I have some experience with this. I had a product called Inspector, which I sold a commercial version of. Unfortunately, it didn't do as well as Sidekiq. So I threw in the towel after a couple of years, and I open sourced the whole thing and just gave it away. But of course, that means no real support anymore from me. It exists out there, it works. I hope someone's getting value out of it. Another possibility is acquisition. We have several examples of this in the Ruby community. Travis CI was a very big startup years ago, founded by some Rubyists. It was acquired in 2019 by these gentlemen. And I think one of the reasons why Travis CI was so popular is because they were one of the first companies to give away CI time to open source projects. So you could integrate your build into Travis CI, and all of a sudden your CI would run automatically. And that was a virtuous cycle, because then the open source developers using it then brought it into their companies, and the companies paid for private use. But the problem is that when private equity takes over a company, they cut expenses as much as possible and maximize profit. And so they cut that free tier. And so, yeah, it maximizes profit, but the Ruby community lost out, the open source community lost out, and these guys got a lot richer. So a third potential avenue is to grant it to a nonprofit whose mission is to support our community long term. I don't know what that looks like. Do we have an organization like that? We have Ruby Central, we have Rails Foundation. Ostensibly, they support some part of the Ruby community, but I don't know if they're the right answer. And really, when you have these sorts of questions, it's really a question of control and direction of the project. Who decides who's on the open source team? Who decides what pull requests and features and direction your project is going to go? And for something like contributed systems, which has significant revenue, who's getting the money? Where's that money going? Who's benefiting? And these are questions of governance. Governance is just a fancy term for how is an organization run. And typically, when you found an organization, you have to provide a document, which are the bylaws. And the bylaws define who makes the decision in the organization, how that entity changes, how those people change over time. Typically, the bylaws defines a board of directors, and then how elections are done for that board. And we have a number of examples of nonprofits in the open source world. Apache, Python, Linux, Rust. You've probably heard of some of these foundations. And they all have public bylaws, so we can read how they work. And guess what? I did that last month. So I learned that Linux and Rust are very capitalist. You got money, you get a board seat. There's no real elections for those nonprofits as far as I can tell. Now, Apache and Python, on the other hand, are much more democratic. Those foundations have a membership, and the membership elects the board of directors. Unfortunately, in the Ruby world, we're not in a good place today. Ruby Central and Rails Foundation both refuse to publish their bylaws. So we don't know how they actually work internally. And so I don't think today the open source community really has a lot of actual community-focused organizations that are accountable to that community. Linux and Rust, if you've got that bag of cash, you get a board seat. But Apache and Python are at least accountable to their membership. Ruby, though, our organizations are private, and there's no accountability to them. And so my fundamental rule is if we're going to have an organization which is designed to help and benefit the community, it needs to be accountable to that community. And so the question really is, what if Ruby had an open, maintainer-focused organization for the long-term support of our open source? Well, we got a new organization a month or two ago. It's called gem.coop. It was created by the Ruby Gems maintainers in that big brouhaha a couple months ago we all read about. Its bylaws and governance are public. It has a membership, and its board is elected by those members. The only caveat is it's brand new. They're still working out what are their plans for the long term. And I don't know either. I know as much as you do at this point. Maybe they could become the Apache for Ruby and adopt open source projects for the long term. Maybe they could be providing a fancy new gem server with enterprise features, which brings in revenue to pay for that long-term support. It's all still up in the air. I don't know any more than you do. But it means that I don't have a clear path for Sidekiq for you, unfortunately, today. It's run by me with an iron fist. I'm not stepping down anytime soon, yet. But I still have this question of, what am I going to do with Sidekiq long term? What should I do? I love my open source community. I love my Ruby community. And I want it to benefit all of you. You've made me successful. I want to make sure you're successful for the long term too. So I don't know what I should do. Gem.coop is a possibility. I could create my own foundation. I could sell out and get that mega yacht. Or I could just open source it all and walk away. But I don't know. I don't know what I should do. If you have any opinions, come talk to me afterwards and we'll talk about it. But I do want to talk about one last thing. Since my efforts to fund open source over the last couple of years have had varying amounts of success, I decided I would cut out the middleman and do some funding myself directly. I want to tell you a quick story, which will give a little more context to this. When I first started in Ruby in 2007, my company was working a lot with Memcached. And so I started working with the Memcached client gem, started opening issues and sending pull requests. And eventually the maintainer said, hey, you seem like you're competent. Do you want to take over maintenance? And I jumped at it. I said, yeah, of course. I love this tech, and I would love to help out. So I did. And about a year later, I got an email from a company called Couchbase. And Couchbase worked a lot with Memcached. And they said, we have this new binary protocol in Memcached, and we would love you to add support for it for Ruby. And, this is the important part, we will pay you to do that. And I thought, interesting technical problem, chance to improve the tooling that we have in Ruby, and I get paid for it? Yes, please. So that work turned into the Dolly Gym, which you may have used before. And so I want to bring that same ethos. I want to enable other people to have that same sort of success story. I want to pay you to improve the Ruby open source tooling story. Thank you. And so I'm happy to announce the Gym Fellowship. This is going to be $100,000 annually in grants to Ruby-related open source projects. You send us proposals next month. Propose, whatever would make you happy, whatever would interest you. Major new features in the gyms you use, significant maintenance that needs to be done. Throw out those proposals to us, and I'm going to work with the people at Gym Co-op to pick a set of winners every year. And we'll send out that announcement early next year. You can learn more at that URL. But I'm really excited to see how this can benefit you and benefit the Ruby community together. And so that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.